Brian, you've had an illustrious background in business. You spent a fair share of time having the ear of top executives over the span of your career. You started out as a consultant in Bain.
That's
You
right.
moved into private equity. You rejoined Bain as a case team leader. Then you joined PSB Academy and the Star Education Group, where we met and became good friends.
Absolutely.
We then sold off the company in 2018, and you are today the communication and strategy chief for Singapore's leading institute, NTUC LearningHub. And the institute trains over 200,000 workers annually, from what I understand.
That's right.
And for those of you who aren't aware, Brian earned his first degree from Oxford and an MBA from Harvard. And Brian, this is a sterling track record. I like to start this conversation with understanding your thoughts around the intersection of business, strategy, and communication. You're in the middle of these three functions right now.
Yeah.
And what is it like being a communication head who also has a seat at the strategy table?
Absolutely. And I think this is such an interesting time with COVID-19 really driving so much uncertainty in a lot of businesses, but actually quite a lot of change as well. I don't know what the audience is feeling, but personally, I felt that I've never worked as hard, or things have not moved as fast. Really, as far as I can remember, even when I was dealing with previous crises in 2008, 2009 for the global financial crisis. Back then, I was in the UK helping some of the banks that had collapsed and really trying to rescue them. Even that does not compare anything close to, I think, what we feel we're experiencing today with the volatility and the uncertainty that we have.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So one thing that I really found is businesses across the board are changing their business models. Most of the audience, who are in business, they might feel that digitalization has become a very, very big trend. And with all of these different ways of low touch economy, work from home, bringing in these digital tools. So having that speed of change has been a defining feature, I feel, the past couple of months.
And what has been the biggest adjustment that you had to make traversing between strategic planning and then executing on communication and operational plans?
That's right. And to me, it's been quite interesting to have a comms role in this time. Historically, comms has always been about it's a bit more outward looking. In that we had to see what are the latest trends, match our company's narrative to that, and sort of make sure we tell our story in the most relevant way. I feel over the past couple of months, with so much change going on within the businesses, and businesses really redefining their customer segments, launching new products with such speed and agility. Something like Singapore Airlines, where you used to be a sort of leading airline, and now having all their fleet grounded and having to come up with all these different ways of bringing people back to the plane. Business is changing so fast. Comms really needs to look inward rather than outward, and just make sure that we as comms professionals have our finger on the pulse of all the changes that are going on, and being able to explain that to the rest of the world. And I feel that that's a bit more of a challenge, because when I wear my internal hat from strategy, from execution, and you ask me, what's the next 3 months going to look like? What's the next 6 months going to look like? I have no idea. And so how then will a comms team be able to tell that story when even the business side is so uncertain? So I really feel it's a unique opportunity for comms to sort of have that seat at the table. We craft a narrative together with the business in a much more involved and hands-on way, and sort of really go through this change together.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper about your experience in trying to lead communications amid COVID-19.
Yeah.
And, COVID has changed the way we run campaigns, and even how IPRS as a non-profit has been operating. How has COVID-19 impacted the way you've done communication, outreach, lead generation at LearningHub?
Sure. The short answer is that definitely a lot has changed, but I think that the key channels have remained the same. So digital was always important, even more so now. I think fantastic PR and fantastic stories out there was important, more so now. I think we really ramped up our research and our thought leadership, knowing that there's so much uncertainty out there, hoping to give people a bit more guidance as to, from a skills perspective, what are the skills in demand and what are employers doing, etc. So I think the how is it's maybe more of an adjustment, maybe more of a rebalancing, but the what we talk about has completely changed. The what used to be business as usual. We had face-to-face courses. Now, over the last 6 months, we've transitioned from 100% face-to-face courses to 90%, 95% virtual. And when you think of NTUC Learning Hubs, our target segment, some of them are quite sophisticated, but a large number of them may be less tech savvy. They may be, more mature and maybe and perhaps maybe lower income and would face a bit more struggles with virtual learning. I think we're really here to help them through this type of really seismic shift in how they learn. But in terms of a comms perspective, how do you reach this type of audience and make sure that they are assured that even though it's shifted, the learning style and the learning platform has shifted completely, they still have the confidence in the quality and in the rigor of what they're being taught?
And so drawing on your experience, spending many years in the education sector, you've seen how universities, training institutes have become one of the last bastions of one of the last bastions of a legacy model that hasn't quite kept up with disruptions. We've been talking about teaching disruptions in school, but if not for COVID-19, I must say, home-based learning and virtual classrooms might never have been embraced by many of these institutions. What do you think needs to happen for educators to preach about disruption and embrace disruption in their teaching?
Yes, it's very interesting. I think talk of disruption in the education sector, I've heard it for the last 10 years. Online universities are coming. What will happen to the traditional models? But up until this year, I think online learning has been treated as important. It's there, but it's not the central, it's not the main method of delivery. And I think this year has really brought that to the forefront. And I think a lot of education institutions, ourselves, universities, have realized, even schools, even tutoring agencies have realized, is that there is real value in the in-person, because online, yes, you can replicate, it gives you so much access, it gives you so much convenience, but the level of in-person interaction, the role plays, the games that you can do in class, the things to make it into group discussions, it's possible to do maybe on a Zoom environment. You have breakout rooms, but it's really not the same. And yet there's still so many benefits of online in terms of being able to have that convenience. Obviously, with safety is a big concern during COVID. So what I've seen most education institutes now struggle with is how to create an effective blended model, online plus offline together. And how do you maintain the good parts about the in-person experience, but you really don't need to be in person every day. You're not going to have an interactive discussion for every single day of the class. Sometimes it is just a lecture style download, and that can be done virtually, or that can be done from the comfort of your home at any time, any place. So what we've seen universities grapple with is, and any institution grapple with, is how to make that a good experience so that it feels integrated and not choppy. I think everyone is doing it now. I would say it's a version 1.0. Maybe it feels a bit disjointed here and there because everyone just had to transform within 2 months. And really the next stage is how do we make it excellent? How do we make this a true blended 2.0, 3.0 experience?
Okay, thank you. So for those of you who have just joined this IPRS PR Leader Series, we are delighted to have Brian San, Head of Communication, Strategy, and Director of LearningHub's Career Agility Division. And please post your questions for Brian on our group chat, and we will try to cover them over the course of our session today. It's a half an hour session. If we are not able to cover all questions, please feel free to tune in to our recap, and you'd be able to get more in-depth visitation of what we've covered in our half an hour discussion today. Brian, I want to just take a step back now. We talked about the future of education and how organizations are adjusting to home-based learning. I'd like to talk about you. You've had an experience of working in the commercial sector. Now you're with Singapore's largest social enterprise, and that's the NTUC Group. What are some of the challenges that you've faced becoming a leader in the NTUC sector? How do people cross over from the private sector to joining and being a part of the labor movement?
Sure. I have to say it's been a very meaningful journey to be a part of NTUC, and you really see the focus of NTUC ourselves, the social enterprises, be they Fair Price or Income or First Campus, they have on really creating that social good. I think for us that social good is making sure our workers have the right skills, have to remain ready and resilient. And if there's anything that this past couple of months have taught us, is that with so much up and downs of the industries, needing to retool and reskill in a short order to maybe shift industries or shift jobs or remain that flexibility is just going to be critical. We might not be able to save every job, but we can make sure and we can really help every worker have that sort of good livelihood. So I think from anyone from a more commercial background coming in, I think one thing is that social side really comes to the fore. It does add a degree of complexity because you are trying to balance multiple objectives. I think obviously all social enterprises are still enterprises. We have to remain financially viable, may not be profit maximizing, but we still need to be sustainable and not be a draw and a liability on the financial side. But once those sort of baseline viability targets are met, it really becomes, how do we maximize that level of impact? And one thing that I've realized as part of comms is that the biggest thing that we can do, at least for LearningHub, is just to have a fantastic having our comms and our narrative really encourage people to learn. Interestingly, it's harder than you think because learning is not always fun. I think long day at work, you ask people, would you rather watch Netflix or would you rather do a course on data analytics? Most people will choose the Netflix. Especially now when there's so much stress is going on at work and you don't have time to catch up with family, who's going to take that time to really learn about blockchain or coding? It takes concentration and discipline. And so I think our role as comms is to really tell those stories of people who have done that successfully, what on the benefit side, what they've been able to do in terms of advancing in their careers, as well as sort of tap into people emotionally and sort of understand a bit about what drives them to learn and see if we can really sort of help them sort of tap into that to be able to find that motivation.
Okay. And speaking about motivation, we've got one question from Janelle. What do you find most challenging in driving out internal communications or internal campaigns with regard to motivating employees to upskill while balancing work during this time?
Really, it's so anytime you send out any sort of training or HR sends out stuff, it's or internal comms, we send out stuff. Most people will say we have no time. And in fact, we ran a survey of over 1,500 learners recently. No time was far and away the number one reason for people not upskilling. So there's two ways that we've gone around that. One is that we've made learning as accessible and as low cost as possible. Really fortunate to be in Singapore. I think with SkillsFuture, once you have SkillsFuture funding plus the SkillsFuture credit, if you're a union member, you can tap on UTAP. You'd be paying tens of dollars or low hundreds for very, very excellent level quality of courses.
And everyone can be a union member. Actually.
And everyone can be a union member. and the benefits in terms of both the representation, but also the support that you have for upskilling. Every union member gets a $250 allowance every year for upskilling, which just really helps on the cost side. Ourselves at LearningHub, we launched our free learning platform. We put 100 courses up for free. We were staggered by the reception of that. I think within 6 months, we have over 100,000 users on this platform. Really spoke to us about the appetite of people learning. So I think from internal comms, it's about showing that the convenience is there. You think of it a cost benefit. The cost is low because it's low financial cost, low time cost, because you can really do it anytime, anywhere now virtually. And the benefits are high. And the benefits is what we found to be the most convincing is first, the intellectual part that, yes, this is a high growth skill. You should learn data analytics, you should learn Tableau, you should learn all these things. It does help your career, as well as that emotional side with sort of success stories and a bit more of that inspirational element as well. Okay,
so I want to talk about the second question that we received, and this is regarding NTUC LearningHub's communication approach. You mentioned that you launched 100,000 free courses online. Curious to find out how has the methods changed in how you've publicized these courses, and how do you publicize these courses in a fragmented digital media landscape? There's so many channels to use these days. Has the choice of your channels changed? And how have you articulated that NTUC LearningHub story through all these channels?
Yeah. I think channels have been the channels are there, but I think the relative balance has been has shifted. I think PR and media coverage was always important, but I think especially so this year as one major pillar. And I think we were able to reach to get to that awareness for the 100,000 learners. We're able to reach a very wide range. Historically, for LearningHub, we'd be in the more I guess maybe more traditional media, Straits Times, Business Times, CNA, etc., and that will always remain the core. But especially for this, when learning, you think of it more broadly as a lifestyle choice. We were fortunate to be featured in places like Esquire and Clio, and when Circuit Breaker came, no one could go out. We actually made it to the top 10 things you should do this weekend, and that type of reframing it as more of something that first, it really helps that it's free, which you use free as a first step and you build onto the paid courses later. But that really helps, and I think that exposure was very positive. The second thing is that we did tap onto a lot more digital communities, and for example, now I think we've really seen a proliferation of more digital support communities, especially, for example, in freelancers, in certain sectors, as people sort of share tips and share job opportunities. We were fortunate to sort of get into some of those, and a lot of the freelancers, when one used it, and then we're really big for swimming coaches, and we're really big in this certain sector. So that influencer / community type of outreach, from a commerce perspective, has been a significant rebalancing in that direction as well.
Okay, so it's actually both traditional and maybe influencer, opinion maker, and the boundaries seem to be quite blurred, eh?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's an integrated campaign, and I learned this from I learned this from you when we were at BSV. But really, it's if you see something on the media, but it's really backed up by a lot of your digital campaigns on social media, and with these influencers in these communities, it's key. The biggest thing is that what we found for influencers is it really has to meet a core need before, and then when it does, and when they feel that, hey, this really helps me, then they go gangbusters, and they will support you all the way. And I think in this case, it goes back to my earlier point. Comms really needs a seat at the table with the rest of the business, because the rest of the business has to design things and has to, the products have to be able to have that strong story to back it. I think historically, what at least for LearningHub, I think what we've seen is that the business side would create things and they would launch courses, they would launch products, and they say, okay, and then comms, you guys get involved, and then you tell the story. I think now, because things are changing so fast and actually the needs are changing so fast, we almost need to be crafting the story together and sort of meeting those needs together before you have any chance of sort of making it through that noise out there. To me, really the biggest thing was having comms as a seat at the table to sort of craft it from the start, and we're able to work backwards and have that integrated effect.
And so you are no stranger to appreciating comms as strategy and partnership, right, with the business function.
Yeah.
Many of our members in IPRS are owners of communication agencies, or they work in communication agencies. Could you share with us what should communication agencies, PR firms do to become a strategic partner to someone like you, a communication chief at LearningHub?
Yeah, I think the key thing is really supporting that changed narrative. And let me explain. It's I think a lot of, at least from the companies that we've seen, and definitely from my own experience and from sharing with sort of other sort of comms heads within the rest of the group, we really feel that the business has shifted in a fundamental way, in terms of delivery, but sometimes even in terms of mission. So, for example, ourselves, we're trying to help a wider segment of people than we had before. That is a completely new market, a completely new set of people. And where we need the most help is sort of reshaping how we tell that story to that still is a compelling link to our original mission and our original story, but how is it a convincing way to add on? And so much of the business changes are highly experimental at this time, and especially if you're in an industry that is really hard hit, you might be trying all sorts of different things to be able to survive and go through. Some of these will work and some of these will not work. And I think from a comms perspective, it's how to sort of ride with that on that journey. I think you want to be able to sort of tell the narrative of how all these new things relate back to my original plan, original mission, in a way that is sort of consistent and convincing. I think the pace of change and the confusion have been my biggest bugbears and my biggest challenges today.
So a communication agency that can keep pace with that, or better still, get ahead of the curve, would be valuable.
Yeah, and this is where the link between comms and strategy really comes in. You almost have to say, for a good story, for a good narrative, this is what impact you should create. And actually, for a comms, then it's not just about the media and what's telling the story, but it's helping them shape that story, which has a very strong link to the sort of strategy side as well. And being able to think with that with your clients is what I would appreciate the most.
Okay, so from agencies, I want to shift into in-house. And in this marketplace that's increasingly being data-driven and disrupted, right? What are some new skills that you think would be crucial for communication practitioners to possess today if they'd like to be a high-performing member of the LearningHub communication team?
Sure. I think new skills would, I think you hit that nail on the head. I think data-driven. And I think the reason is the key to success, I think, is the more integrated you can be with the rest of the business, then you'll really looking inwards as well as outwards. And when we say look into the rest of it, how do you understand the business? It has to be understanding the data of what the business is telling you, being able to understand the financial reports, the operational reports, and being able to spot trends and draw a narrative out of that. I think will be key. I mean, for us, for example, a major trend is our significant decline in in-person classes, our growth in virtual, what subjects are growing the most, which translates into what are skills in demand, what do people want. I think without that understanding of that data, you're not able to tease out that narrative. And as a comms person, you see the forest for the trees. Everyone else is in the weeds, is in the trees, and trying to stay afloat. You have to understand everything they're doing and putting together, and really, really make that narrative shine.
Okay, so data skills would be one
Absolutely
important area. Okay, so I have one more question, and this is about the trainers, the educators themselves. Many of them seem to be struggling to adjust and shift to digital teaching, virtual classrooms, and delivering on their classes digitally. What are some of the measures that NTUC Learning Hub has put in place to support these stakeholders?
Our trainers are really, apart from the customers, our most critical group of stakeholders. They front the learners every day. There's no training institution without trainers, and it's such a different style teaching on Zoom. How do you get everyone to like put up your hand? How do you know that they're not surfing the net? So we sort of put them through sort of 2 or 3 days of training just in terms of how to deliver. And there's so many things that you have to watch out for. You have to take more frequent breaks. You have to do classroom interventions differently. So it's doing that, giving them that train-the-trainer support, but it's also making sure that they have a hotline to call during class. I think that has been our biggest thing, in that, there can be all sort of technical issues. There can be all sort of learner issues in class, which you just would not anticipate in a face-to-face class, like someone Wi-Fi go down, or we had a power outage yesterday, and the trainer had to go offline for half an hour. So having that beefed up hotline and operational support has probably been one of the biggest things.
How has NTUC Learning Hub been collaborating with the private sector in bringing on board either new curriculum or new technology to benefit its students?
Yeah. I think the private sector collaboration has been the most important, because we realize that the world is changing so fast. There's no way we're able to create content and curriculum fast enough to match. And so our approach is to partner with top companies from around the world to really bring in their content and make it accessible to learners. So data analytics, we would go with Tableau. Cloud, it's Amazon Web Services. E-commerce, it's with Shopee. Data and network admin is with Microsoft. So really, find the best companies in that sector, take their latest content and sort of make that into an easily digestible course. It's sort of the fundamental of our approach to teaching.
And speaking about Tableau, I had the privilege of joining you at the NTUC Learning Hub 15th anniversary celebration. And the Institute has been actually at the forefront of preparing workers for the information age. Today, we're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. If you could encapsulate Learning Hub's sense of purpose in Singapore today, what would that phrase be?
I think it's just supporting company transformation, supporting job transformations, and supporting job and company transformations. I really think that upskilling and retraining is a way to help people, individuals, either get better in their job or even needing to move sectors with all the changes coming in, as well as making sure companies have the right skills and capabilities to transform themselves. It's going to be a transformative 1 or 2 years ahead. With all this going on, and I think our mission is to support in those two twin transformations of job and company transformation.
So if I can be a bit cheeky, Brian, and push you a little bit on that, right? We talk about skills acquisition.
Yeah.
We've seen the aviation sector get decimated. I think that's the word that Minister Ong Ye Kung used to describe Singapore's aviation industry. And as a result, we have seen highly skilled individuals, pilots, for instance, being let go. As an institute that is at the forefront of equipping Singaporeans with deep skills, what do you say to highly skilled workers who are worried that what has happened to pilots might also happen to them?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that honestly we think about every day. The core is for us to find out which sectors are growing, because once you know which sectors are growing, you know how to retrain people into it. So pilots, a lot of stewardesses have been fantastic in terms of their flexibility. A lot of them have moved into the healthcare sector, for example. Healthcare is one of the sort of booming sectors at the moment, and both primary care at the hospitals, but also community care, and the excellent service standards that SIA instills in you has been fantastic there. ICT has been a terrific growth sector. I mean, one thing I didn't realize, but work from home, the demand for tech support workers has just really gone through the roof.
Huge,
And
yeah.
our tech support and network admin courses have been some of our hottest and most in-demand courses, together with cybersecurity. So for anyone who's I think skilling has two outcomes. One is you skill for another job, and the second is the skill to remain relevant in your current job. I think both are going to be key, and depending what sector you're in, it depends which one you go for. But it's really about keeping abreast of the trends in your industry, and I think if needed, just preparing ahead of time, and having those right skills to move into those high growth industries. Because trust me, I mean we've been surveying quite a lot of industries, and the growth is definitely still there.
And in your experience in serving so many industries and working with people from different backgrounds, there still seems to be among some a mental barrier of people who want to do and embrace lifelong learning, which is a phrase that NTUC LearningHub is fond of championing.
Yeah.
What do you see to be a way to help people to overcome that mental barrier, for employers to inspire employees to embrace lifelong learning as a mantra throughout their career?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a question from Yvonne Yim.
I think that is the central job of the comms team. I mean, we have to drive that narrative and make sure people see. This really was the formation of our most recent campaign, and we asked, why do people learn? And the number one reason that people learn, I think everyone is in Singapore super practical. Number one, far and away, was to improve my career prospects. But then we realized, then we went one level deeper. Why are career prospects and work important to you? And by far and away, sort of 70-80% was saying to provide for my family and myself. And so one thing that we formed the basis of our campaign was drawing that emotional link between learning and providing for your family, and helping maybe shift that mindset a bit. It's not for me, it's for someone else. And so our tagline was, we don't just learn for ourselves, we learn for the ones who matter.
Wow.
Through things like, it's really going to be about, motivation is an emotional motivation. You can have some intellectual things, but intellectually, I should go to the gym. Does that mean I go to the gym? Not really. It has to be, peer pressure. It has to be emotional. It has to be you feeling you're devoting to a cause that's bigger than yourself. And to us, I mean, we really feel that learning is such a core part of job security, and job security is such a core part of providing your family, that it's our job to tell that story in the best way possible.
Okay, and speaking about having that higher order or higher calling in doing what you do that goes beyond yourself and doing it for others, you've had a track record of giving back. You're an advisor with Conjunct Consulting, and you have essentially built your career around a higher purpose of creating social value. How has giving back and having that social mission shaped you as a communication professional?
I think it's really, so the whole point of having social impact is you want to be of some help to people. And I think as a comms chief, your whole role is to make the story clear of how your company helps people. Because at the end of the day, a company produces products. I mean, it can be a for-profit, it can be non-profit, it can be social enterprise, whatever. Your company has to serve a need. Apple serves a great need. Samsung, and that's why they're successful. And so this whole notion, it's not about my story. It's about the customer story. It's about what their needs are in a really visceral and fundamental way. I think this focus on others just helps you craft that story so that they are the hero of that story and not you.
Okay, well, time has passed us by, Brian, and this is such a fascinating conversation. I'd like to just ask you one final question, if I can. And that's really around the role and relevance of a convening body, an industry body like IPRS today, in which you are a member of. What is the relevance of IPRS in this day and age? What does being a member of IPRS mean to you?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, I think I've always really appreciated IPRS for being able to connect with fellow comms professionals. But I think especially now, it's really brought home that so many different professionals and in so many different are going through things in so many different ways. There's so many different solutions to things, and we're all experimenting at the same time. I think a forum like IPRS where we can come together, learn from each other. You know, I love to learn from my mistakes. Hopefully I don't make too many mistakes because we, you know, if we can learn from other people's experiences as well as our own, especially in such an uncertain time as this, that's just incredibly valuable. And to have that platform to share and to dialogue has been fantastic.
Well, thank you for your very kind words, Brian. And if I can say, I've known you for years now. Working with you, you've always brought on board a very professional work ethic to the table. You've brought on board that strategic insight, and you make sure that you follow through. You're somebody who is totally dependable and deliver. And you're doing such a great job at NTUC LearningHub, which has an impact that goes beyond, I think, commercial outcomes. You're really making a good social impact. So thank you very much on all of
I appreciate that, Marcus. Thank you.
And so on that note, you know, I'm sure that the community will continue to be enriched by generous contributions of members, IPRS members like yourself, Brian, thought leaders like yourself. I'd like to also take this chance to thank members of our audience for joining us today. Thank you very much for your questions. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next IPRS PR Leadership series.